a veteran of the Houston police force, was jailed after he allegedly murdered his wife of 30 years for flirting with another man. The victim, identified as school librarian Belinda Hernandez, aged 52, was found dead in her kitchen on March the 23rd of 2019 by her adult daughter. Hernandez had reportedly succumbed to multiple gunshot wounds inflicted by her husband, Hilario, who'd been a Houston police sergeant for roughly 3 decades at the time of the incident. After taking his wife's life, Hilario fled south, but he was ultimately apprehended at a motel near the Texas-Mexico border that was located roughly 250 miles from his home in Pearland. Maddened by jealousy, he resorted to murdering his own wife, with whom he shared 2 children, because he thought she was flirting with another man during a gathering with friends. The Houston Police Department relieved Hilario of his duties, and he was ultimately sentenced to 40 years in prison after pleading guilty to first-degree murder. Number 7. Dwight Braithwaite. On December the 6th of 2013, a 21-year-old Brooklyn resident fatally stabbed a man following an argument inside of a fried chicken restaurant. The dispute was reportedly initiated by Kadeem Wilkinson, who'd taken issue with what he perceived to be flirtatious interactions between his girlfriend and a stranger at the Flatbush restaurant, who was identified as Dwight Braithwaite, aged 26. After Wilkinson confronted Braithwaite over the alleged flirting, the conflict turned into a physical altercation and spilled onto the sidewalk outside of the establishment. As was captured by video surveillance and subsequently used as evidence against him in court, Wilkinson ran to his nearby apartment building, where he grabbed a knife from his home. He then returned to the street and plunged the blade into Braithwaite's back, inflicting lethal injuries. Wilkinson's girlfriend testified against him during the case's legal proceedings, recounting to the jury how he'd admitted to her that he'd stabbed the victim in a jealous rage. Wilkinson was convicted of first-degree manslaughter and faced a maximum sentence of 25 years in prison. Number 6. Emily Elliott. A 23-year-old university student took her own life in June of 2019 after she discovered that her partner had been flirting with another woman on social media. Emily Elliott first met Shay Doyle in 2016 while they were both attending Huddersfield University in West Yorkshire, England. Their relationship was initially characterized as a close friendship, but as time passed and the pair grew closer, they eventually became romantically involved and moved in together. The couple reportedly broke up in early 2019 after Elliott learned that Doyle had been talking to another woman on Facebook. Elliott was so distraught by her findings that she unsuccessfully attempted to end her own life in February. One another on social media in the aftermath of their separation, but they ultimately resumed dating at the end of March. Doyle later testified in court in a good place after getting back together, and they'd even discussed the possibility of having children. On June the 28th, however, Doyle received concerning messages from Elliott and was subsequently unable to get in contact with her. He traveled 29 miles via train to reach his girlfriend's house, where he found her dead on the floor of her bedroom. The coroner who examined the case ruled that Elliott had taken her own life. Number 5. Selvan Achar. In December of 2020, a man from the Mughal province of Turkey fatally stabbed his own wife after exchanging flirtatious messages with her while posing as a potential love interest online. The suspect was identified as Tanju Achar, aged 32, who'd reportedly carried out the murder after his 25-year-old wife, Selvan Achar, demanded a divorce due to the man's abusive behavior towards her. While concocting a plan to eliminate his partner, Tanju reportedly learned of a local law which stipulated that infidelity could serve as a mitigating circumstance for murder. This aspect of Turkish legislation meant it was possible that Tanju might receive a reduced sentence for killing his wife if he could prove that she'd been unfaithful to him. He subsequently set out to deceive Selvan into thinking she was being courted by various suitors on the internet. Tanju and his friends created fake online profiles and began sending flirtatious messages to Selvan to conjure the illusion that she was cheating on him. The husband's devious plot culminated on December the 8th of 2020 when he stabbed Selvan in the back with a knife. The authorities reported that the blade pierced the woman's heart and she passed away instantly. Although Tanju had sought to lessen the severity of his punishment by using Selvan's purported infidelity As an excuse for his actions, the Fethiye Public Prosecutor's Office demanded the man receive an aggravated life sentence for deliberate murder of a spouse. Under Turkish law, prisoners serving such sentences are only eligible for parole after spending at least 36 years behind bars.
As an entrepreneur who is deeply involved in the beauty industry, I have been very devoted.
Number 4. Isaiah Roberts. On May the 25th of 2012, a jealous man fatally shot a teenage immigrant whom he felt had flirted with his wife on a New York City public transport bus. After the suspected flirtation had already taken place, Lawrence Jones of Brooklyn lured 18-year-old Isaiah Roberts to a remote location near Howard Avenue in Bed-Stuy. It was there that Jones confronted the teen over his alleged inappropriate interactions with his wife. A heated argument erupted between Jones and Roberts, during the course of which the former pulled out a handgun. As the teenager attempted to flee, Jones fired a total of 5 rounds in his direction, with one bullet striking him in the back. Roberts was found by the police lying face down in the street, and he was ultimately pronounced dead after being transported to Kings County Hospital. Jones was taken into custody and charged with the young man's murder, for which he was eventually sentenced to 20 years to life behind bars. The victim, a native of Trinidad, reportedly held aspirations of one day becoming a professional architect. Number 3. Sakira Loseke. A 22-year-old woman was left to bleed out in the middle of a North London street after being stabbed by a jealous acquaintance on September the 8th of 2019. Sakira Loseke had been targeted by Siobhan Collins Grant, aged 26. The pair had reportedly been friends for a time, but they were said to have experienced a falling out in August of 2019 after Collins Grant accused Loseke of flirting with her girlfriend, Savannah Simpson, while the women were spending a night out at a club. After engaging in a physical altercation, the two women were thrown out by the nightclub's bouncers. Tensions between Loseke and Collins Grant subsequently died down until the two crossed paths again a few weeks later. On the day of the deadly incident, Collins Grant was standing with 4 other females outside of a friend's residence in Chalk Farm, where she had previously been residing. She'd been kicked out the day before and was there to pick up her clothes. Whilst the group was standing in the street, Loseke and 2 of her friends arrived at the scene. According to court records, Collins Grant charged the victim without warning, delivered a blow to her head, and stabbed her through the breast with a kitchen knife. She then ran to Camden and tossed the murder weapon into Regent's Canal. Emergency medical services were called to tend to Loseke's critical stab wounds. A doctor attempted to perform open-heart surgery on the woman as she lay in the middle of the street, but she was pronounced dead just before midnight. Collins Grant pleaded guilty to manslaughter and was sentenced to 8 years in prison. Today's topic was requested by A Beautiful Mind, Chaos Dramana, and Herbert Donnell Gray III. If you have any other topics you'd like to learn about, subscribe and let us know in the comments section below. Number 2. Fatima Muhammad. A Chicago man carried out the murder of his girlfriend's teenage cousin in West Fargo, North Dakota, on June the 6th of 2016. The fatal incident was precipitated by a dispute between 26-year-old David White Jr. and Fatima Muhammad, aged 19. The two were being driven home by Muhammad's cousin, who was in a romantic relationship with White at the time. During the course of the ride, Muhammad allegedly told her cousin that White had been flirting with her. The man was enraged by the accusation, to which he reacted by brandishing a gun and firing a fatal round into Muhammad's head. White threatened to shoot his girlfriend as well if she attempted to run away. He forced her to drive more than 600 miles east to his sister's house in Chicago. After pulling into the garage, White retrieved plastic bags, a laundry bag, and a pair of gloves from inside the residence. He placed the plastic bag over Muhammad's head and put the rest of her body in the laundry bag. The man then set down plastic bags on the floor of one of his sister's closets and situated the dead body on top of them. A few days later, White and his girlfriend dumped the body behind a vacant house near 60th Street and Aberdeen Avenue. White's girlfriend managed to escape his control and flee to her sister's home in Duluth, Minnesota. She went to local authorities to report her cousin's murder, and a short time later, Chicago police were notified of the situation. Muhammad's body was recovered and White was sentenced to 20 years in prison after pleading guilty to attempted murder in North Dakota. He was later extradited to Chicago to face a murder charge. Number 1. Joseph Trevizo. In May of 2018, an individual with mental disabilities was murdered by his own caretaker, who suspected the man of flirting with his girlfriend. Joseph Trevizo, aged 34, was being looked after by 42-year-old Jesse Dackins and his romantic partner, Tiffany Warren. The three reportedly lived together in an apartment in Mesa, Arizona. Court records indicate that the dispute between Trevizo and Dackins had arisen after the former was accused of flirting with Warren. Dackins grew jealous of Trevizo and allegedly attacked him with a knife, fatally stabbing him a total of 27 times in the living room of their home. He subsequently wrapped the victim in a butterfly print shower curtain and placed his body in Warren's car. The couple cleaned up Trevizo's blood and other traces of the attack from the scene of the crime before setting out for Star Valley, where they ultimately disposed of the dead body in the woods. The two then planned to flee to Wisconsin. During the drive there, however, Warren's vehicle broke down and the couple stole a van that belonged to Dackins' former employer. They were arrested by Winslow police on their way out of state on suspicion of vehicle theft. While in police custody, Dackins confessed to carrying out Trevizo's murder and subsequently led officers to the location of the body. Dackins and Warren were charged with first-degree murder, abuse of a child or vulnerable adult, theft of means of transportation, and tampering with evidence.